everyone. Good afternoon, Prof. Pillay, and to our participants that have already joined us. My name is Kosietu from the Research Capacity Development Unit. I'll be your moderator for today's session. I would like to thank you all for taking your time to attend the session. We hope it will be very useful and it will help your postgraduate journey or your research journey. Just some housekeeping rules. Please note that this workshop is being recorded and all the resources that will be used here will be shared to your Moodle community, which includes a recording of this workshop as well as the presentation slide that will be used. Just allow us some couple days, usually takes two to get us a recording, and then we will upload after 2 days the recording. Also, please note that if you do have a question for Prof, you are more than welcome to type in the chat or just to make use of raise hand button. Either myself or Prof will notify, will get the notification, and we will let you to ask a question. A feedback survey or evaluation will be shared to your chat. Please do fill that form. It will take less than 5 minutes. We use that as a form of reporting and also to give feedback to our facilitators. Please allow me to introduce Prof. Pillay. Prof. Pillay joined Technicon Witwatersrand as a lecturer in chemistry on the 1st of July 2001 and is now 23 years in service at the University of Johannesburg. Prof is currently a full-time professor of analytical and environmental chemistry in the Department of Chemical Sciences at the University of Johannesburg. Her research interests are in the developing nanomaterials for water treatment and forensic applications. She has to date hosted 5 postdoctoral research fellows and graduated 20 master's students and 13 PhD students as well. She has published 77 journal articles in international accredited journals, 6 book chapters, 2 conference papers, and filed 1 patent. She has presented papers at 12 international conferences, has a Scopus Edge Index of 34, Google Scholar Edge Index of 35, and 2,943 citations. Prof. Pillay served the Department of Chemical Sciences as a deputy head of a department, teaching and learning for 3 years, and also represented this department on the Faculty Teaching and Learning Committee and Faculty Higher Degrees Committee. She has additionally served as a reviewer for several internationally accredited journals, as well as served on review panels for the National Research Foundation and Water Research Commission. Without any further waste of time, Prof, you may proceed with the session. We will keep the recording and upload on Moodle communities for those that were unable to join us today. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Nkosietu. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can hear you clearly,
Okay.
Prof.
All right, not a problem. I just want to share my screen quickly so that you are able to see my presentation slides. Can you please confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes, we can see it, Prof.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So what we're really looking at today is the whole process of research methodology, and I believe I have a science, health sciences, and an engineering audience here. Some emphasis will be placed on the methods, the qualitative and the quantitative methods, so to speak, but I'm basically going to take you through the whole research methodology process. So this is basically what the workshop will entail. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about what is research methodology, an overview of the whole process, also the difference between qualitative and quantitative research and research methodology. Where does this whole process of research start? The importance of the literature review and the proposal, the whole research journey, especially as far as the data gathering is concerned. And there we look at the qualitative and quantitative aspects. And something that's going to be very important in your research is going to be the interpretation of data and also the dissemination of the data. In other words, the communication of the findings of your research. Now, the teacher in me always starts off with an activity, so I want you to answer the first question for me. What is research methodology, or what is your current understanding of research methodology? I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to think about that, and then we're going to engage in a discussion on that topic. So I would like to see some comments on the chat box in terms of what is your understanding of research methodology.
Can I take a shot, or I wait for the 5 minutes?
No, we wait for the 5 minutes
Okay, Prof.
because they need time to think about the answer and come up with the response.
I have a problem with my chat. It's saying chat is only available during meeting. I can't type anything on it. I don't know why.
Okay, it's not a problem. You can speak then. You can just switch
Okay.
on your microphone and give us your answer.
Okay.
Okay, if you've just joined the session, I want you to think about that first question of what research methodology involves, and we'll just be discussing it in about 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. You've now had enough time to think about that first question of what research methodology is. So I want to hear from you now. What are your thoughts about the term research methodology? What does it mean to you? If you are unable to type on the chat box, please raise your hands and I will happily answer your questions or give you an opportunity to speak. Okay, so can we hear from you? What is your understanding of research methodology? What does it mean to you? Okay, go ahead, Thompson Dube.
I thought research methodology, I assume research methodology refers to the different research tools a researcher opts to use when collecting data. And these vary from questionnaires, interviews, observation, and document analysis.
Okay, so your emphasis is more on the methods there. Okay, thank you. Anybody else has any other comments on what is research methodology? Yes, go ahead. I can't see your name. You are appearing as ADIU Jelp. So sorry about that.
Not a
Can you
problem, Prof.
please, okay, go ahead
Um,
and tell us your thoughts on research
I think
methodology?
Thompson already gave a part of it. I tried to understand about research methodology. Research methodology basically is the approach at which the whole research is going to be done, on how you're going to achieve your questions and objectives, and how you're going to carry out the study. So the research methodology is a very important aspect of the study because without it, you will not be able to finalize your study. That's just what
Okay.
I understand.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate those contributions because I've been muted. It shows me your understanding to date. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation, which more or less compiles what you've shared with us. So, okay, so it's actually the way in which we engage in conducting research, how we gather information. And like you rightfully said, it's to address our aims and objectives. So it's how we go about performing our research activities. So that's really what this methodology attains. But you find that we tend to focus more on the gathering of information rather than the whole process itself that we need to follow. Just to unpack, research methods can be classified into two categories. The one is qualitative, and that's where we're trying to find out what is happening. What am I seeing here? What am I visually observing here, right? And then there is the quantitative aspects where we are engaging in measurements, where we are actually bringing in numbers, the numeric aspects, and that can include statistical information and so on. So there's two types of research methods. But what you find is collecting the data is only one part of the whole research journey or the research methodology process. So it's not the whole research methodology process. It's only one step in it. You find that the whole research journey starts off with conceptualization. Then you've got to engage in the literature review and the proposal writing. And then only do you get to the step of data gathering And once you've gathered the data, then you do the interpretation and the dissemination. So the data gathering part is only one aspect, one step in the whole research methodology process. So I'm going to leave you with another activity for 10 minutes, and please don't mind, this is a workshop, so it has to be interactive. And we're starting off with that first process in the whole research methodology process, and that is the conceptualization step. The first thing we need to unpack is what is conceptualization and why is it important? So I want you to think about those two questions. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to think about it and come up with ideas. So we're going to discuss that aspect at 13:35. you, everyone. I want to now hear your thoughts on this. What do you consider conceptualization to be, and why is it important in this whole research methodology process? Let me hear your thoughts and views. Please go ahead. It's nice to know what your understanding is before we unpack what it means.
Good day. Maybe let me
Okay.
take a,
Yeah,
a
sure.
stab at it. I'm thinking conceptualization might be taking different ideas, either abstract or not, and just trying to convert them into measurable things based on research.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying it's more taking what's already out there and trying to measure, confirm it. Okay, I have a comment on the chat box. This is from Tembelani Nkosi. Conceptualization helps researchers to know the type of data that they're collecting and how they will collect it. Yes, that's a very important point because that speaks to why it's important, right? Now, the reason I brought this up is because many of us see research methodology as only that process where we're just going to go get our data, write it up, and that's it. But what we fail to see is the qualitative aspects of the research methodology process is you can't just jump and gather data. There has to be some planning and some thinking involved. So that's where the conceptualization comes in. That's the qualitative aspect of your research methodology is what are you investigating? Now, it's important for you to know that because that's the only way in which you can know what research methods you're going to engage in to collect the data and so on. So thank you, Tembelani. You basically got the importance of it spot on there. So let me go back to my presentation. Okay, so conceptualization involves the real planning phase of your research that you're going to undertake or your research project. It's about identifying the problem. We don't want to go out there and collect information or gather data just for the sake of doing it. There is a problem that we are trying to identify here, and we want to investigate that problem and even provide a solution to it. So how do we do that without identifying it? Then there's the formulation of the key question. What exactly are you investigating here? That is very important. So it's about conducting research with a purpose. You must have some kind of reason as to why you are undertaking the research. It's not a simple case of, I'm going to go into the lab and do X, Y, Z. Or I'm going to go into the plant and do X, Y, Z. No, you got to think about what you're doing. Look for the problem. Try and figure out what the problem is, what you're trying to investigate. And that is why every research project has to have aims and objectives. So you must know what you're trying to achieve in undertaking the research. So this conceptualization is a very important qualitative method in the whole research methodology process. And for those of you who are doing PhD, you would have already been told by your supervisor that it has to be an original contribution. So you have to identify a problem that has not been solved yet for it to make an original contribution. right? So now I want to give you another activity to do. I want you to look at your specific discipline, whether it's science or engineering or the health sciences. Identify a problem which you would like to investigate. Formulate the key question and state the aims and objectives of the research. That is quite an involved process. So let me give you 20 minutes to do that. At 2 o'clock, I will listen to your responses. Take any problem. It can be a problem in your current project or just any random problem, and do the following exercise. Right. Thank you, everyone. I'm interested to hear your problems in your discipline, your key question and your aims and objectives. Now, when you're sharing this information with us, oh, okay, I see someone is saying there's no audio from my side. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can, okay.
Yes,
Right.
we can,
So
Prof.
when
Yes, we
you're
can hear you.
introducing, yeah, when you're introducing your problems, just state which discipline you are in. I'd like to hear a few responses to see what you came up with. Can we go ahead? So what is the problem that you're investigating? What is your key question? And what are the aims and objectives? Okay. Are there no responses? I don't see anything on the chat box. Nothing on the, okay. Yeah, there's nothing else on the chat box. Okay. Okay, it seems like many of you, it's either you don't want to share it or you, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Thompson.
I just want to give a shot at it.
Yeah, sure, go
Uh,
ahead.
the major question, the problem that I've identified to investigate is what led to. By the way, I'm a pre-registered student in PhD,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at the dimensions of organizational leadership in institutional politics, policy, and governance. But I'm now identifying the problem is what led to the Zimbabwean government to introduce Education 5.0. It's a philosophy that they think can turn around the education system in Zimbabwe, and I'm investigating what influenced them to come up with that philosophy.
Okay. All right. So that's an interesting topic. Which discipline are you in?
This is education.
Education. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, so your problem is understanding why they actually came up with that whole idea of,
Yeah.
you called it Education 5.0. So what actually led to that? So that is the problem, right? And in a
Yeah.
way, it covers the key question. So
That's right.
what would your aims and objectives then be?
Right. You will have to forgive me
Mm-hmm.
because
No, it's
when
fine. I
when
understand your
when when
pre-registration.
yes,
Yeah.
when I was about to do your assignment, my supervisor sent back feedback.
Oh, okay.
So I became preoccupied to check what the supervisor was saying and did not go beyond much of what he had assigned me to do. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's I appreciate your honesty about that. But yes, you are in the pre-registration phase and you are a PhD student. So it was important for you to identify your problem. So I see you've got your problem clear there. You got your key question clear. Now it's just a question on the aims and objectives. What are you aiming to do? You're going to identify the factors, and then you're going to perhaps see whether they are valid and propose a way forward or something to that effect. So thank you, Thompson, for
Thank you so
sharing
much.
that. Anybody else wants to contribute there? Because especially if you are in pre-registration phase, it means that you're still planning your project, if I've understood correctly, right? So it's
That's right.
important to have, this is the whole conceptualization process, right? It's important to know what is the problem, what are the key questions you're trying to answer, and then formulate your aims and objectives. So what I was trying to show you by getting you to undertake this exercise is the critical qualitative aspects of planning the research, conceptualizing what you're actually going to do there. So obviously, you cannot just undertake research. There has to be a problem that has to be investigated. So he's identified the introduction of this Education 5 system in Zimbabwe. That to him is a problem. He needs to understand, why did they introduce that? What led to that? And then unpack his aims and objectives. I'm seeing another hand come up, but I can't see the name, so please pardon me. Can you go ahead and give us your contribution?
Prof, I was just looking at the topic, social economic dynamics around blockchain adoption in supply chain management of rail transport in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Okay, so that is your topic. Yeah.
With regards to questions, first question is, what is the current state of supply chain management in rail transport in Johannesburg, and what are the pain points that blockchain technology can address? Question two, what is the level of awareness and understanding of blockchain technology among stakeholders in the rail transport industry in Johannesburg? Question three, what is the socioeconomic factors influencing the adoption of blockchain technology in supply chain management of railway transport in Johannesburg? So I'll just give those three, and yeah.
Okay. All right. No, that sounds like that sounds good. It sounds interesting. I'm not an expert on that field, but I can tell you the transportation sector in South Africa is worth looking into. So tell us, what discipline are you in?
I'm in FEBE,
FEBE
PhD.
engineering. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Specifically, which type of engineering?
No, I'm in operations management.
Operationals management.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that is an interesting problem that you're investigating, because yes, transport is a problem, and blockchain management somehow speaks to that. So thank you. Let's hear Tebe's response.
Hi, Prof, and everyone else. My name is Tebe. I'm in pre-registration for PhD. So I work in a cement producing company. So there's this new drive of decarbonization. So according to me, it's like what I'm looking at is like the effect of decarbonization in cement from the cement producer perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, you want to see what impact decarbonization has on the quality of cement that you produce.
Yes.
Right? So the focus there is on product delivery as well, I would think.
Yes, it is.
And that I would think is a current problem that's applicable to the cement industry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think you all have more or less a problem that you want to investigate. You've identified the key questions pertaining to that. So like I said, the whole point of this exercise was to ensure that you understand the purpose of your research, why you're actually doing it, and what problem you're trying to solve. So I think many of you were clear in looking at the problem and the key questions. And then obviously your aims and objectives come from that. So, for example, you may state for your cement quality to identify the factors or the aspects of decarbonization that may impact on the quality of cement and so on. And then you will design your investigation based on that. I just want to give you an example from my discipline. So I'm from the field of environmental chemistry, where we look at cleanup technologies for wastewater. So as you very well know, 4 years ago, we had this COVID-19 pandemic, which also impacted on water quality in two ways. One, people were taking medication like ivermectin and so on, and there were concerns that these medication was forming part of sewage wastewater, so it was contributing to pollution there. And then also those infected by the COVID-19 virus, there were concerns that fragments of that virus may go into the water and may affect human health. So the key question there was to find out to what extent was the administration of medication and also people becoming infected with the COVID virus impacting on water quality, and specifically the sewage water, right? So the aim was basically to analyze sewage water and see if you could detect traces of the medication and also the COVID-19 fragments in there, to know for sure that it's actually there. And then you can plan your investigation around. So it would be both a qualitative and a quantitative. The first thing you would do is look at whether it's there. And then if it's there, you want to know how much. And then you identify methods that will help you confirm that it's there and how much of it is there. So the point that I'm trying to get at is we all are investigating a problem. We have to know what question we're trying to answer in our research and what the purpose, the aims and objectives are. Now, this is the important qualitative method, or the first important qualitative step that you take in conducting your research. And remember, those of you involved in PhDs, you'll have to ensure that the problem you're investigating doesn't already have a solution. Because if it does, then that means you're not making an original contribution, which is the requirement of the PhD. And that's why that initial planning phase is very important. Now, fair enough, your supervisors will guide you along the lines. But you also need to develop these skills as you go along, because beyond your PhD, you may want to do postdoc. You may even be involved in supervising students. So you need to know how to guide them to identify problems, formulate the key questions, and get the aims and objectives together so that can speak to the methods that you're going to use. Okay, so that unpacks that aspect. Then I don't think we need to take a break to answer this question, but many of you in your pre-registration phase, and even when you're writing the proposal, you have to write a literature review. So can I get some thoughts on what the literature review actually is? What is your understanding of the literature review? And it's also nice if I can hear from you. Why is that literature review important? Why do you have to go to that tedious task of conducting a literature review before you even get to gathering the data? I want to hear some thoughts and comments on this before I proceed. So yeah, I just stop sharing so that I can see your hands. So Tell me in your own words, what do you understand about the literature review and why do you think it's important? Some thoughts or comments on that? Yes, go ahead, Thompson.
I think I think literature review is important because you want to know what has been said, who has said what, for how long has this been in discussion, what new ideas will you contribute, as it were, and why it is so important is what are the gaps that are there, which this research would also contribute to the body of knowledge. I think that's what I can say.
Yes, exactly. You've got it spot on. You basically want to see what's already being done in your field of studies, because especially in the case of PhDs, you don't want to duplicate what someone else has already done and published on, because that wouldn't be an original contribution. And another key point that he raised is you want to identify the knowledge gaps, because the knowledge gaps are what going to inform the purpose of your research and why you actually undertaking the studies. Now, this particularly applies to PhDs, where the set requirement is for you to make an original contribution to a specific field. The last thing you want to do is engage in a whole research project and at the end of it find, hey, but someone else did it already. So now I can't publish and it's not original work. And at UJ, remember, one of the requirements for a PhD is you must have at least one publication by the time you graduate. So it's things like that. So that literature review phase is very, very important. And it's important that you understand its purpose, because many students see the writing of the literature review as a tedious task. Like you just got to sit and read papers. And for those of us who don't like to read, it can be quite tiresome. But it's important because you need to know what have other people done. So you can see now where the gaps are and where you can fill in the gaps and bring some new knowledge to the field. Now, even for master's students, it's not really a requirement for you to make an original contribution, but if you can identify knowledge gaps, that helps, because that provides you with a bigger platform to actually publish your research. So I just want to go back now to my presentation. Okay, so if we move on from there, the literature review has a number of functions. It enables you to see what others have done already or what research they've performed in your field of study. It enables you to identify knowledge gaps, and it also forms the basis of your study, right? It gives your study that purpose. So you can argue and say this and that and whatever's been done, but no one actually looked at why Zimbabwe introduced that education system. It is not clear in the literature why that was even undertaken in the first place, and so on. So it informs the knowledge gaps in your studies. And at PhD level, it does involve some intensive critical discussion where you don't just read the papers and report on what you've read, but you actually criticize knowledge gaps and say, but this was not done and this is missing and whatever. So it's really important. And it's also important for you to understand some of the concepts that are important for your particular study. Remember, although we may be doing practical research where we're performing experiments in the lab or whatever, At the end of the day, understanding the theoretical concepts of what you're doing is important. And this is where engaging with the literature helps you. So we may see it as a tedious task, but it's there for a reason. And then once we have the literature review in place and we've identified the problems and the aims, the objectives, the methods, whatever, then we start our proposal writing, or what is considered to be the planning phase of the project. And that's got to have a clear problem statement. So you must be clear about the problem that you are investigating, the knowledge gaps, and so on. Now, some of us like to make advanced predictions as to what we expect to see in the results. And that's where we formulate our hypothesis. Now, this is not done in all proposal. It depends on your specific faculty or discipline, or whether your supervisor insists on it. And then your experiments or your methodology is designed either to prove or disprove the hypothesis, right? So this is normally an optional part in your proposal. And then you got to have a clear justification for the project. And that's what the literature review phase, why the literature review phase is important. You need to justify why you're undertaking the research. What led to you wanting to investigate it? That needs to come out very clearly in your justification section of the proposal and have the clear aims and objectives. So the first part we unpacked is really important aspects of your project proposal and your project planning. And this now, once you have all of this in place, then you can speak to the research methodology. Okay, you know what you're investigating, why you're investigating, what the aims are, what you're hoping to get out of it. You even have an idea of what results you might be expecting. Then you design your research methodology. How are you going to investigate this? What data are you going to gather? And what sort of information are you hoping to get out of that? So you've got to have a clear work plan in place in your proposal. Now that you know what the problem is and what you're aiming to do. Now, some proposals require a well-planned and a realistic budget, but this doesn't apply to students who are writing their master's and their PhD proposals. Generally, we don't ask for that. This usually comes in when you're applying for funding or a grant. And most funders, like the NRF, look for a budget that speaks to your aims and objectives. Now, you can't say you're going to use the budget to buy cauliflower when your project is about apples. Let's put it that way. So the budget has to be aligned to your aims and your objectives. But that I highlighted in red because it's when you are a student and you're planning your project, that's not really required. The funding is your supervisor's problem. Your whole plan is to show what you're doing in your study, why you're doing it, and how you're going to do it. So the proposal speaks to the what, why, and the how, and everything is there. And obviously, you've got to have references because your justification has been informed by undertaking a literature review, okay? So that's now the planning phase of the research methodology, which is a qualitative phase of going through identifying the problem, what are you investigating, why, and how you're going to do it. Right, so then once we have our methods and our work plan in place, then we decide, do we want to take a qualitative or a quantitative approach or both? How are you going to gather the data? Are you going to do it in the form of experiments, interviews, questionnaires, and surveys, right? Now, depending on what type of data you're hoping to gather, that will inform it. Mostly for science and health sciences and even engineering, everything is mostly based on experiments, be it in a lab environment or a plant environment, but there may be some other qualitative aspects. For example, in Thompson's project, he may want to conduct some interviews with some of the people in the education department at Zimbabwe, right? And sometimes your interview has to be structured, or you may not be able to do a one-on-one interview. Now, in that case, you got to draft a questionnaire. There's certain questions that the people have to answer for you to get a sense of what's going on. And surveys also involve questions, right? So the methods you follow can be quantitative, in which you're conducting measurements in an experiment in a lab, or they can be of a qualitative nature where you're conducting interviews, questionnaires, and surveys to gather the information that you need. But a very important step about the data gathering phase of the project is the quality control and the data validation. So you need to, at some stage, question, how true is that data? How is it a true reflection of what you want to see? Now, when it comes to the experimental part, you can't just do one experiment and take the results from the experiment as that's what the answer is. It's not so easy. We get errors, we get deviations, and so on. So it's very important to perform an experiment more than once, verify, validate the data properly before you actually report it. And that may include an average of a number of experiments. You may want to do a statistical analysis by calculating the mean, the standard deviation, and so on. Or it may be just performing statistical tests to check that there's no bias in your data and so on. So you can see that data gathering phase, or the methodology, the qualitative and quantitative approach, doesn't just only involve gathering data. There's other key aspects. There's a problem, aims and objectives, and the literature review that informs what type of data you want to gather. Then once you have the data, you need to do some critical evaluation of the data. How correct is that data? Is it true? Does it make sense? Do I need to go back and check again before you actually report it and you make it public, right? So that's the point I was trying to raise at the beginning of the session. It's not just a matter of gathering methods and this is how I'm going to do my research. It's about planning, thinking carefully about what you're doing and aligning everything to that, right? So that's the data gathering phase. And then once you have the data, it's not just a question of putting the data on a piece of paper and saying, here's the data. It's about interpreting the data. What is the data telling you? Has it spoken to what you wanted to find out? And there you have to show a good understanding of your key concepts. You have to show that you've engaged with the literature, you've read the literature. This is what the literature says. It's a well-organized argument. You have to show some command of your discipline, that you know your discipline, you've applied the key concepts correctly to explain your data and to tell what it's, to say what it's actually telling you, and then you can draw some sound conclusions based on your data. Now, sometimes things don't always go as planned. Sometimes you may start a project expecting certain results, but then you find you don't quite get what you're expecting. And that goes back to you looking into why. So as long as you can provide sound explanations while interpreting your data, that is really the most important phase of your research. And when your examiners are examining your thesis and your master's dissertations, they look, do you have a well-formulated problem? Do you have clearly stated aims and objectives? Has the literature been checked? What have you learned from the literature? And for the PhDs, they look to see, have you identified the knowledge gaps correctly? Have you clearly articulated which aspects of the knowledge gaps you are investigating? Then they look to see, how did you gather the data? How did you validate and ensure that your data is telling you the correct thing? Then the interpretation. Have you looked at your data and been able to explain what's going on using literature, using key concepts? And how are you able to draw conclusions based on that? And that's the whole research process in a nutshell. But I just want to quickly give you some time to think about. I think we do have some time left. Yes, it's 14:31. So I want you to go back to the project that you identified in the activity 1 that I gave you and briefly describe the methods that you would use to fulfill your aims and objectives and indicate whether they are qualitative or quantitative and what data validation methods would you use. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to think about that and let me see what you can come up with. Okay, thank you. I'm interested to hear about what methods you're going to use and what your data validation methods are going to be. I think most of you are in the proposal writing phase, although some of you might even be already engaging in the research. Let's hear what your contributions are. Sorry, I just want to go back to the previous. Okay, can I hear? Okay, I think there are some comments on the chat box. Okay, that's from, no, that's the survey that you have to complete. Okay, no, there's no comments. It's just a message that you have to complete a survey at the end of the session. But any thoughts, now that you know what you're investigating, why you're investigating, what's the purpose, any thoughts about what methods you're going to use, whether it's going to be qualitative, quantitative, or a bit of both, and how would you validate that? Any comments on that? Yes, go ahead, Tebe.
Yeah. Okay, well, with mine, I'm not sure if I'm on the right track, but it's mostly on the experimental method. And I was planning to use a quantitative because we are trying to find out if decarbonization will work for the cement industry. So there'll be a lot of like identifying the clays, and then from there we have to do a testing of that material and then see if it fits within the scope of the standard. So I think experimental work and then do a qualitative approach, and then how we're going to validate it, I think to be based on statistical analysis to see whether it's within the Z scores or it's not. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think you've got it spot on there. So basically, you're using a mixture of methods. It's both quantitative and qualitative. Okay. All right. I saw someone typing in the chat box. Let's see. Okay. So Tembalani says he will be using qualitative and quantitative methods. He's not yet sure about the validation. So Timbalani, can you just remind us what is your project on? Or what is the problem that you are investigating? Timbalani, can you hear us? Okay, oh, I think he's unable to unmute, so he's typing. Okay, while we're waiting for him to type, any other contributions?
Prof,
Yes, go ahead.
I'll be using a mixed method,
Okay.
both qualitative and quantitative. In terms of the validation, that I have not actually touched upon, but I know we get there. But in terms of what the study, it's mixed method at this point because I would have to speak with the people in the industry and also now the public. So qualitative would be used to speak with the people in the offices, and then the quantitative through a questionnaire interview will be used to collect data.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. No, that's, I think, yeah, that's an interesting blend of the qualitative and quantitative because you'll be involved in interviewing people, getting information from them, and also some measurements there. Okay. So Timbalani says his area of research is optimizing energy efficiency use in small and medium enterprises in South Africa. So there is, okay, no problem. I understand that you are unable to unmute. So basically, if you're looking at Well, the validation, there would be some statistical analysis, I would think, because especially if you, well, for quantitative measurements, you've got to do repeat experiments. You've got to evaluate standard deviation and so on, and use error bars when you're drawing your graphs and so on, right? And just something else that came to mind is there's different methods of reporting data as well that we have to be mindful of and not just disseminating it. You can communicate your findings in the form of a graph. So it involves skills like knowing how to draw graphs, knowing how to use error bars on graphs, or you could just present your data in tabular form. And if it's numbers to indicate error bars, you've got to indicate plus minus the error that you are expecting there. So it's little things like that. So how you report data is a method as well. You find in some disciplines, there can be a mixture of figures and tables, for example. In other disciplines, there might be tables only or graphs only. It all depends on what the specific discipline is and what you're hoping to achieve. And it all goes back to that initial conceptualization. So thank you for sharing that with me. And then so the data gathering and the data validation is important, but how you present the data in your results is also important. One needs to use error bars and so on, and bear in mind how you validated the data, so to speak. Now, once we have our data in place and we've interpreted and we need to know what's going on, then
Sorry, Prof,
comes, yes, so go ahead.
There's a
Yes,
hand
no
from
problem.
Thompson.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, Thompson, I did not see your hand because I went back to my presentation. Go ahead, Thompson, ask your question.
Thank you. Does the use of a questionnaire alone qualify a study to be quantitative?
Well, it all depends on what information your questionnaire has. For example, if you are conducting your research in a questionnaire format simply to find reasons, then it may be more a qualitative aspect, although you may bring in some statistics. You may say 50% felt that this was the reason, whereas the other 50% felt that was the reason. So you may report a pie graph or something. So in that sense, it can be quantitative as well. It all depends on your approach there, okay? Does that adequately answer you?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I'll come back at the end if you need to ask any further questions, but let's just go back to that last bit. Well, once we've gathered the data, we've validated, we've interpreted it, the next step becomes how do we disseminate or share it or communicate it? And there's a number of different platforms in which this is done. You may choose to present your work at a national or an international conference. It can take on the form of an oral presentation or a poster presentation. You may also publish conference papers. Some conferences actually insist that if you're a delegate, you got to publish a paper, or it may be in form of your normal journal articles published in various high impact factor journals and so on. It may be a book chapter or a whole book, depending on what it is. One can, even if it's something completely new, one can file patents, and then this leads to commercialization of your research, where you can produce products, prototypes, artifacts, and so on. And this is what the university is leaning towards now. It's not just about completing your degree, producing the thesis and the publications and graduating. But if you can take your research forward and commercialize it and become an entrepreneur, it's been strongly encouraged. And obviously the PhD thesis and the dissertation, master's dissertations, which you write up, are another way of communicating your results. And something new that has been brought into the UJ community is the PhD oral defense, or the viva. Now, many students are seeing this as a monster that is standing in the way of attaining a PhD qualification. But what they don't realize is it also gives you a platform to share your work with an audience. So you've done the project, you've completed it, now you're sharing what you found and you're defending it at the same time. So the Viva can be another way of sharing your data. So there's numerous processes that we deal with in terms of sharing our data. And all of this speaks to a peer review process. When you submit an abstract for a conference, it gets reviewed and you get feedback. When you submit a paper or a book chapter or a book, it usually gets sent out for review. Patents, there's more legal implications involved, and the technology transfer office comes in there. Then the thesis and the dissertations, as you know, are sent to external examiners. There's normally 2 for a master's, 3 for a PhD. In your PhD oral defense, all 3 of your examiners who examined your thesis are normally present, and in exceptional cases, only 2 may be present, but we need a minimum of 2. So this whole process of having your work reviewed by peers is important as well in your data dissemination, and also in terms of whether your articles, your book chapters, and so on have any value. So that's the whole process of data dissemination. And then the question, let me just go back there. I'm leaving you with is, where does research end? And we can discuss that and conclude now. My question to you is, does research ever end? I'm interested to see what your answer is before I give you my view on that. Does it ever end? Yes, you've gone through the whole process, you've formulated your problem, you've had your proposal approved, you've done your data gathering, published, handed in the dissertation thesis, got your degree, but does it end? That's a good question. Does it ever end? And well, my answer to that is never. It never ends. It's a never-ending story. You will always find knowledge gaps that need to be filled, or there'll always be recommendations for future work. I see Timberlani has written the comment, it doesn't end, but it evolves. That's exactly my point. You have scope for future work, so it's not the end of the road once you stop there. There's always something new that you may need to research or validate or whatever. So that's why you have a chapter in your dissertation or in your thesis that addresses scope for future work. Okay, so that's all that I have to cover with you today in this workshop. We did start a bit late, so I can allow about 10 minutes for questions. Any questions that you have, anything that needs clarity? So if I may just get a sense, are you all still in the proposal writing phase, or have some of you already started your research?
I'm in the proposal stage.
Okay, you're in the proposal stage, Thompson. Anybody else who's not in the proposal stage?
I'm also in the proposal stage.
Proposal stage. Okay, I hope the session has given you more insight as to what research methodology is all about, and the steps that we follow in conducting our research is important. So I know right at the beginning, many of you mentioned methods, but it's not just about methods, it's about planning and knowing what you're doing before you design your method. So it's quite a tedious process. It's a 2-year journey for master's students, a 3-year journey for PhD students. But at the end of the day, I'm sure that it will be all the more worth it. I see I'm getting comments on the chat box that you found it to be informative. So thank you. I am relieved to hear that because we want to design these workshops so that they can be of help to you, of benefit to you some way, because that's really what the postgraduate school is trying to do. We're trying to support you in your postgraduate studies, right? And these are things that your supervisors don't always get time to discuss with you. They are there, they guide you through the process, but sometimes helping you see how the different pieces of the puzzle connect together. Like, why are you here? Why are you doing this research? What are you going to achieve at the end of the day by getting that master's or that PhD qualification? That all is important because you may not realize this, but each and every one of you is making an important contribution to a real life problem out there. From what I've heard about your projects, I know the cement industry, I've worked with AfriSam as well. The cement industry's got lots of issues that need to be addressed. Education is something that needs a lot of research, and that's why many of your supervisors may also be publishing in education, the scholarship of teaching and learning, as they call it. And then even the blockchain industry, transport system in South Africa, all these are real life problems. They have value. And so you know now the purpose of your study, why you're doing it, and what value add it's going to bring. And that's really what's important. That's the goal we were aiming to achieve in having these series of workshops. And I think there are more detailed ones that will go through the proposal writing in more detail, the literature review writing in more detail, the data collection methods in detail. My job here was to just give you a whole overview of the research methodology process and how the different pieces of the puzzles connect together. And you can see it's one process speaks to the other. If you don't know the problem, you cannot design the aims and objectives or your methodologies. If you don't have a method in place, you cannot gather data. And if you don't have data, you don't have results, you don't have anything to communicate to your peer community about what you've really unpacked in your study. So it's one aspect fitting into the other. So I really hope that it informed you. I want to wish each and every one of you well with your postgraduate studies. We look forward to seeing you all graduate and get that qualification. So best of luck, and the slides will be shared with you. The recording of the session will be shared with you. My email address is on the slide. So if you have any questions that you want to direct at me, I am based in the Doornfontein campus. I'm in the John O building, Department of Chemical Sciences, room 4161. if any one of you want to pop in and ask any questions, you're welcome as well. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very
Same
much,
to
Prof.
you.
Thank you, Prof.
Appreciate
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Prof.
Very much. And to all our participants, thank you. Don't forget to fill up the evaluation form. Thank you so much, Prof, once again.
Thank you, Rasidi.